behalf of the MCA Social Committee, you're all welcome to
this one.
Because of that aspect. Also, Muslim as an identity, right? Being a Muslim American as an identity, we're not included as part of that category. Why? Because again, that right of citizenship is not there. Right? So even the citizenship for a Muslim in the current period is subject to this Islamophobic social imaginary. It operates here, it operates in Europe, it operates in India, but here's another, it operates in Muslim majority countries as well. We have a track of research of Muslim majority countries, particularly if you think about how Muslims are dealt with in relation to the situation in some of Muslim majority countries. Women in hijab is being contested, a Muslim who have their political identity being represented. All this, again, so we don't think that it's only isolated, but rather it's a part and parcel of a larger process where the Islamophobic social imaginary dominates and influences how people see the Muslim and how the Muslim is approached within civil society. So again, one is to understand that Islamophobia is part of a state initiative or state elite structure. It's not only individual bias, which can be seen, the individual bias can be seen and emerges, but it's out of the state. The second, we often look at media, right? Media resonates what the elite priorities are. And again, Chauncey says that the role of media is to manufacture consent of the citizens. So when we see Fox, we critique Fox, but Fox is representing or reflecting the dominant narratives, both in terms of elite political discourse, but also the priorities of the elites that have already identified the Muslims broadly as the new enemy to be targeted. And that is connected to both the political structure, but also connected to the economics. Again, I remind people to go back and listen to Martin Luther King's speech of 1968, The Three Evils of Society. If you haven't listened to that, it's imperative for you to listen. Militarism, materialism, and racism. Without crafting an enemy, we cannot drive the militarism. And without racism connected to militarism as well, we cannot actually drive the materialism that is at the foundation, at the core of our current political system. So, in essence, when we think about media, our critique of media had to always be looked upon in relation to the priorities of the elites. And what are their priorities and what are the set agenda that is directed. And again, we could go back to the 1992 Huntington thesis, the clash of civilization, which began to say that the new threats in the world that we need to prepare ourselves is the Muslim world. Or again, he argued that both the Sino-Islamic alliance, meaning the Chinese with the Muslims, are the threat to Western civilization, and as such beginning to prepare the ground for us to target both the Muslim as well as China as the threat. And he goes into cultural racism as a way to try to really argue his case. So cultural racism becomes the signpost for scientific racism. It's just the more disciplined approach. The third part, in terms of Islamophobia as we witness it today, it intensifies around election campaigns. Islamophobia intensifies around election campaigns. It's a byproduct of electoral politics. This is the evidence again in the US. This is evidence in Europe, again with the studies in various European countries. Contrary to popular opinion, while terrorism exists, Islamophobia spikes during election cycles. Even though that we might find spikes during terrorist act, the sustainability during election cycles is what we actually see. In addition, the political party that is out of power, that is leaning to the right, monetizes Islamophobia in its election campaign in order to win votes at the ballot box. That's why in the US, when George Bush was in the White House, he got up in the mosque and says, Islam is peace. And therefore, the Republican apparatus domestically did not mobilize because they had power, and also they needed Muslims as partners in fighting the war on terrorism. It's a separate issue, we could critique that, but in general, they did not need Islamophobia in order to win seats of power. When Obama won the election, and if you remember, Obama was being attacked as a closet Muslim. And at the time, about 47% of the American public was actually thinking that he is a Muslim. But why was that attack? Because again, the research data showed that the largest segment of the American public would not vote for a Muslim candidate or an atheist. So you would think that election campaigns are, again, that these politicians just speak without actually reason. No, they look at the data, they look at the polling, they look at where the wind is blowing, and begin to formulate their election strategy based specifically on the polling data. So the polling data, we know that 64% of the American public would not vote for a Muslim candidate. And then the top rank is for an atheist. 67% of the American public will not vote for an atheist. So what was on the line of attack on Obama? That he's a Muslim, right? And the second, that he is a socialist, which is again, can point. So they're trying to get the 64%, 67% in order to attack him. But they misread the audience or the public at the time because people were heavily anti-war and they wanted just to get out of the constant war in Iraq. But the line of attack actually developed. And we saw it materialize in 2010 midterm election. Right? The 2000 midterm election in the United States was where Islamophobia was monetized into votes at the ballot box. And it's not surprising that the person that led the birther movement is sitting in the White House today. He wrote the birther movement, the anti-Muslim campaign, beginning in 2008 after Obama got elected, and he wrote that all the way to the White House. In the same way that Brexit in the UK with the Independent Party and also the Tory used anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant sentiment in order to, again, win the seats and win the vote in Brexit, even though that it goes against their economic interests, right? Which gets me to the notion that sometimes empirical data is not sufficient to the mobilization of sentiments that get people to vote against their own interests. Right? Again, the Islamophobes have been able to mobilize the country, both in here and in other places, in such a way that people are voting and monetizing Islamophobic votes against their own interests. So, important to connect that it's an electoral strategy, monetizing anti-Muslim discourse into votes at the ballot box by right-wing leaning governments or right-wing leaning parties that are out of office, and they rally their base in order to come back into office and maintain their base, shave some percentage from the opposition and bring the independent into their rank, using tactics of fear, patriotism, otherization, racialization, and that takes place systematically, and we see it not only in the US, in Europe, and we see it in India. Right? Which requires for us to actually have a deeper thinking of how to undo some of this work, because it's actually very well stitched together. And that gets me to the report that we put together with CARE, the legislating field. The Islamophobia industry has spent $205 million to create the Muslim boogeyman. Many of you possibly watched the Monster Inc. movie. Think of the Muslims as being the modern Monster Inc. that is being used for a particular set of interests in the United States. And this is the Islamophobic industry, 110 or 113 organizations that are demonizing Muslims. They're connected to the Europeans. They share resources and they strategize. They're connected to India and they both share resources and strategize. They're connected to Burma in terms of what the networks that are taking place. And it's not surprising that you see the same type of language, the same type of mobilization is used across the Atlantic. So think of Stop the Islamization of Europe. It's the same structure, same language, Stop the Islamization of America. And they actually cross the Atlantic, they strategize. When Pamela Geller had her protest in New York, She recruited the EDL, the English Defence League, to actually provide the security. These are neo-Nazis in the UK. They brought them in here to provide the security for their protest. Same thing for us in here when Modi came in here. Some of the pushback against some Muslim protesting him actually came from individuals who thought that their relations with other communities takes precedent over challenging Modi's record of committing crimes, human rights violations and crimes against Muslims, and therefore some of the individuals, and I think some of us who were involved in the protest at the time, there are some people who actually did not want the Muslim community to put out a statement protesting Modi's visit. They did not want us to have a protest outside in the streets when he came in here, thinking that this is not what you call good for interfaith relations. So you have a whole discourse where interfaith relations is being used to silence a critique, especially a critique with somebody that had crimes on their hand. So, which would get me to the next level, we need to respond in a very systematic way. We need to develop coalitions, but principled coalitions. Right? I am not for just having what you call, let's get together, hold hands and sing We Are the World. I am for singing, even though it's halal haram inside, but it has to be a principled song. You have to be consistent. You cannot what you call, oh, I have a relationship in there, and that relationship might be jeopardized if I come out and be in the forefront or speak against a criminal enterprise that has actually killed almost 2,000, right? And want people to be silent on this. If you're silent on killing of individuals, then I have really no benefit for your coalition, because the next time around you might sacrifice another member of your coalition for what you call instantaneous or immediate benefit. So Muslims have to build coalitions, principled coalitions, that have to take both domestic and international issues in consideration. I'm not asking you to take on statements every day, but that principles have to be there in such a way. Third is to localize your work. That we need to localize our work in here. It was not coincident that some of our civil society leaders attended and had company when Modi came and visited here, as well as when he visited the Muslim world. I'm like completely shocked that some Muslim countries actually rolled the red carpet for him and celebrating his presence as if like the next coming of Alexander the Great. This is what you can add in insult to injury. If you don't respect yourself, don't ask people to respect you. And at least have the basic respect, again, to say wrong is wrong in its face, regardless of what you think is the immediate or long-term consequences. So we need to put pressure on some of our own civil society leaders in here, whether it's city councils or local congressmen, that they think on the one hand they could sit next and take pictures next to a person that have committed atrocities, and they think it's okay to come and say to Muslims, Salaam alaikum, I know how to say Salaam alaikum. I care less whether you say Salaam alaikum or you like falafel, hummus, or chicken tikka masala. I care less about what your cultural nuances is. What I want is principled position. If you have a principled position, you're welcome to stand on the stage. But if you come and just brush our face on Eid, and you think that you just because you have a couple of words of Arabic, or you say Kehal He, and you think that you're going to get our votes, that politics has to be put in the can and has to be disposed with, period. You have to respect yourself, and only people who respect you in principle, those are the people you honor. Otherwise, basically, we have really no reason for us to change our condition, both in here or impact parts of the Muslim world. So, begin your work locally, right? Get them to take a statement. I know they take a statement about everything under the sun. They take a statement about a bird in the trees. Just think of people in India as birds of the trees, or the people in Myanmar, right? Rohingya. Think of them as birds. If you took a position on birds on the trees, I want you to take about humans that are being killed and massacred on a daily basis. So don't allow them, again, to disrespect you and disrespect us in here, and especially in here in Santa Clara, we have a critical mass. We have a critical mass. That critical mass have to have its say and have to stand in principle and begin to actually effect change on the local level, politically, in such a way that people will take the principled stance on a regular basis. The last thing that I want to say is, again, that this requires resources. This work requires resources. So again, there's individuals that do work in relation to India, so make sure that you continue to support, right? Collectively, it's not a one-person responsibility, it's a collective responsibility. And what we need is to be creative of how to actually maintain this work and extend it, because that's how, in the long run, will make change possible, but the type of work that you need to undertake. So hopefully, we will be able to do and make an impact in the long run, and I'm confident that collectively we'll do so. So Jazakumullah for listening. If I offended anyone, I respect you, but I need to tell you the truth. And that's basically, I'm a truth teller. I'm not in here just to give you a PR. If you wanted a PR, there's a lot of TV PR that can give you. I'm not in the business of PR. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Takbir, Allahu Akbar. Amazing presentation, as usual, by Brother Hatem Bazian. And really he spoke the truth and made us think of our actions, what we are doing. There will be question and answers period after everybody talks. So if you have any questions for Brother Hatem, please note down and we will take all the questions.